Welcome back to the War Room powered by Prep Baseball. And today's show, I am ecstatic about. This is probably the most preparation I've ever done. I am ultra interested in it. We have royalty, college baseball royalty here in the house. The legend from D1Baseball.com, co-owner Kendall Rogers in the house today. Kendall, thanks for coming on.
You got it. You know what? I'll send you that check in the mail. I promise you for saying all that. Yeah, it's good to be here. I tell you what, college athletics in general, it feels like something changes every single day. I mean, honestly, this week, it was like Monday that we thought that some of these conferences might announce, when they're going to, how many scholarships they're going to have, when they're going to set rosters, or when they're going to make teams do rosters. And it's like every single day, the day moves back. So it's like, so in college athletics right now, who knows what to expect, and who knows in 3 years, Tulane might be like a, Mountain West school for all we know.
We shall see. And Kendall, you jumped right into it, because the big reason I had you on is because I was so curious. And for those listening right now who are living under a rock, or you have no interest in NCAA baseball or recruiting at all, the NCAA had a mega ruling by Judge Claudia Wilkin this week that we're going to talk to Kendall about here. He had a great article on D1Baseball.com with 12 points. Kendall, I love when things get put into bulleted points, because my simple mind can really soak it up much easier. Let's dive right into it. What did the judge say? What happened with this ruling?
Yeah, so the big thing is, honestly, it's kind of surprising it didn't go to trial. The judge had an issue with, the whole premise to everything that we're talking about right now is NIL and the ability for a player to capitalize on their stardom, or ability for a player, if they're going to Texas A&M, LSU, University of Texas, when they're there, they can make money. And one of the things that the NCAA, or the NCAA had, and kind of the rebuttal between the plaintiff and the NCAA was, we want to put guardrails on NIL. So essentially what they want to do, they want a third-party organization to basically deem an NIL deal legitimate or illegitimate. And Wilkin was basically like, hold on a second. Like, wait, we're going to go through all this rigmarole and then go, we're also going to tell you that, we're going to make the determination that some of these NIL deals are bogus, aka we're going to limit what people are going to be able to make. So it all kind of went against the whole basic idea of why we're doing all this. And so they went back to the drawing board a little bit. They came back and they kind of figured that out a little bit. There's still going to be a third party deal, but and then on April 27th, they sign off on it. So there were a lot of people in the industry that honestly were very surprised it didn't go to trial. I think for college baseball and college athletics, I think it's a great thing it didn't go to trial, because, I was talking to actually a couple of lawyers about this, is, if they would have gone to trial, it would have been at least 26 until they actually went to trial. And then it would, the trial will take a year. And then all of a sudden you'd have appeals. So, I mean, we'd be in the situation to where we wouldn't even have a resolution to this entire deal until the end of 27. And I'm just one of those people. I don't like, just kicking the can down the road. Like, let's just do what we're going to do and let's move on. But, it's one of the situations to where, like, even if they push it through on April 27th, which is fully expected, like 99.9% chance, that doesn't mean that more lawsuits are going to come out, like in other things. So I think we're far from over on this deal. And the fact of the matter is, just going back to the NIL and the third party, I do not understand how, in the current landscape of college athletics, how a third party can determine anything. I made this this comparison on our other podcast. If Quinn Ewers at UT, a football player, if Shoals Creek Saloon decides that he's worth $300,000 a year and gives it to him, like who the hell are you to say that, like, that's not legitimate? That, like, he's not worth that. Like, the market value of a player is what the market is willing to pay.
True.
And end of story. So I don't know how that enforcement arm is actually going to be able to enforce anything. They can't even enforce the rules that are in place now on anything. Like, how are they going to enforce the rules on that? Like, it's like Murray State pays for the sins of LSU.
It's definitely interesting. I'm going to go to some of your bullets. You brought up that April 27th date where this will go into effect. So we'll be following that closely. Looks like it's a near slam dunk for that. But your second bullet point, more specifically to baseball, talked about kind of that all sports are going to turn to head count, what I would call a head count sport. So the scholarship limitations kind of get erased, and you can give now the rosters down to 34. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is originally it was going to be all head count, but so essentially what sport and you're not wrong on this because it's very confusing. It was confusing to me for the longest time. So actually, every sport will end up being equivalency. So
what's the difference in those two?
Okay, so this may take like a 10-minute explanation. So
do it.
Like if somebody like yourself, knowing how good you were, you're probably on a full ride. So we're probably not talking about the stars like you. But the fact of the matter is, when you look across the country, let's say like for instance, right now the SEC is talking about giving 24 to 25 full scholarships.
Okay.
Well, those full scholarships in the 34-man roster can be spread out over 34 players. So you have 20. Let's say you have 20. I'm going to throw out 25 scholarships. Let's say you have 25 scholarships. Well, those can go to 34 players, right?
Okay.
It doesn't have to go to 25. So, I mean, if you look across the SEC, ACC, Sun Belt, Ohio Valley, Big 12. A lot of those states have aid. Arkansas has the border stuff. LSU, the state of Louisiana, I guess more importantly, has their aid rules. Florida has awesome stuff. Mississippi, as you well know, has really good stuff, especially for junior college players. So, with those things that you can stack on top of an athletic scholarship, a lot of these programs, even if you give them 25, they're going to be at 34. And oh, by the way, if you don't have that, and I'm going to drop Texas and A&M here, and even Texas Tech, the state of Texas does not have a lot of financial aid or academic aid for athletes. Well, what do you do if you're A&M or Texas? You go, okay, we don't have this, but what we can do is hook you up with,
Buster's Barbecue.
Yeah, Bucky's convenience store come in and give Jace Lavalette $200,000, and oh, by the way, you're all of a sudden at a full scholarship. So, I mean, there's going to be ways to make that a full 34. The question will be, what do other leagues do? Because I think the SEC is going to set a cap. I've heard the ACC at least was discussing the idea of letting every team kind of do what they want, which is fascinating because like Graham Neff, the AD at Clemson. He's a massive baseball guy, and it wouldn't surprise me if they decided to give a full 34. Whereas Duke, and I'm not like bagging on Duke and like baseball program, but let's be honest, Duke's probably not going to be like, yeah, let's give 34 full rides at a school that's probably $90,000 to go to school there. So the leagues that allow the programs to do whatever they want, that'll be the most fascinating thing. Like, okay, who gives a full 34 and who doesn't?
It's interesting, and I think most people, I talked to a bunch that don't really understand the scholarship situation of the athletic department and the admission side. They're kind of separate. So when you have that scholarship, the athletics department is paying the school. It's not you're on a full ride, we just erase that cost. No, the athletics department pays that to the school. So that's something important. And then the other thing is, especially in baseball, yes, 11.7's been for forever, right? We always remember 11.7. Not every school has had 11.7. Not everybody in the country is fully funded. The same way, not everybody's going to get 34 scholarships. You talk about the SEC, that's the big king, right? They're only 24, 25. They're not even looking at 34. So from our perspective on the high school side, it has a lot to do with, hey, as a high school athlete, there's still going to be partial scholarships. Now, college baseball coaches, along with having a recruit coach, they've also had to balance books and get really creative in the past. So this will only help arm those schools that are adding to that. But it will be fascinating. You talked about like some conferences limiting, but the ACC going free, that's where I find it really interesting. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the idea of it's essentially sounds like there'll be a salary cap for the school. Right? Football is going to get this amount, which will probably eat up most of it. Hoops, probably a lot. But then it comes into like, do we think we can go after baseball? You talk about a school like Clemson. The AD loves baseball, has a rich history. Do we try to invest a little bit more there? We can build some clout out. What do you think? What are you hearing will happen from that side?
Yeah, in terms of like the settlement itself, like I don't think baseball is going to get a ton really anywhere.
Mm,
I think the gap's going to be bridged with NIL.
okay.
I was going to go back real quick to the conferences. We had a Big Ten coach tell me the other day, or tell our staff the other day, that the Big Ten may actually stay at 11-7 for the
The
time
Big
being.
Ten?
Yeah, like that's a legitimate possibility. Like it's hard to believe, but like the problem is a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people think the Big Ten schools are the same as the SEC in terms of number of schools or number of athletic programs. The problem is, let's say an SEC program has six, or an SEC athletic department, excuse me, has 16, 17 programs. Some of these Big Ten schools are like 30 plus. I mean, that's a lot of kids to pay for.
Mhm.
So, on the surface, it's like, man, they really don't care. But it's like one of those things, like, Ward Manuel, the Michigan AD, came out a while back saying, we will not cut sports. Well, if you're not going to cut sports, like you're going to have to trim out, you're going to have to kind of stand pat elsewhere. And that would make sense as to why they'd be 11-7. The other thing that I think is important to note, and this is important for high school parents, because I think a lot of people out there, there was a coach twofold here. There's a high school coach at a prominent California high school a couple weeks ago, who flipped out on like USC's coaching staff because some kid got cut like, 4 or 5 weeks before school. And like he was flipping out about it, like, you should not send your kids to USC. Well, the problem is these schools don't have a choice. Like if in a year, it was a kid for next year. I'm sorry, it was a kid for next year. They were about to sign him here in November for
Yeah.
next year. They ended up cutting him because they're going to have to go down to 34 players. So I think parents need to know that like your kid might be cut, but like it's not a personal thing. Like these schools have to go from 40 to 34. And by the way, some of these schools, I will not name names, but some of these schools are bringing in 52 guys in the fall, and there's a very good chance they're going to have to start the fall with 34.
So,
So
Kendall, let me ask you more about that. And
yeah,
sometimes I think it is a blessing in disguise to get cut before that signing day, and we actually will discuss that in another episode internally here at
yeah.
Prep Baseball about you might be better off than going to campus and getting cut before this fall. How likely are we to have that 34 date have to be September 1 or before the fall? Like where we stand with that?
Yeah, I definitely like hesitate to speak in absolutes on any of this stuff,
Mm.
but it sounds like at least the SEC and the ACC were leaning towards doing like a hard cap in the fall before workouts even begin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's been talk of doing it in the middle of the fall. There's been talk of doing it before the fall. I have not heard anything about doing it after the fall.
It's so fast that you look at like the worst case scenario for something like that and the
Mhm.
pressures of especially those big schools, right? Your SEC, we just recruited this great class. Think about Vanderbilt, LSU, all those
Yeah,
great on paper classes. The MLB drafts in mid-July. Now you just lost 6 guys who you weren't anticipating. You're trying to get now back up to 34. 3 injuries into the fall, right? For most schools, you're going to have
yeah.
injuries. It happens at baseball, especially pitching staffs. Now you're at 31 going into the spring. Now you only have 2 catchers. What I wanted to ask you and pose this,
Yeah.
do you think on the horizon there may be some mid-semester free agency or some in the future, hey, mid-major versus, the SEC, whatever it may be. Hey, this kid, we just had 2 catchers go down. Instead of always going to the JUCO or having to scramble, I think about Mississippi
Yeah.
State last year got Joe Powell, like he was like at fireman school or whatever it was.
Yeah, he committed to A&M, quit baseball, then like 2 weeks later was like, "Oh, why not? Let's run it
Like
back."
so like I'm curious about that because the product and the stresses going into the fall for
Yeah.
something like that will be immense. I did want to bring up, you brought up a point in your article about the voided walk-on programs. Can you go into a little more depth with that? Like, is that just strictly because the scholarships can be spread out and less?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, man. If you have 25 scholarships and you have a 34-man roster, like, are you really gonna? I, I think waste is a really bad word to use, but like, are you going to use one of those precious roster spots for a walk on? Probably not. So that leads me to my next point is I would like to see the NCAA do two things here, and I think this is going to have to happen. I think they're going to need some sort of like taxi squad or something. I mean,
Yes.
as a pitcher, like if you go in the fall with your pitching staff, and let's say three guys get hurt, which I mean it's happened before at schools. I mean, like you're screwed going in the spring. Like I'm not saying your season's over, but like you're really behind the eight ball. So I think something like that has to happen. I think the other thing for me that's going to be really interesting is I think fall ball is going to be diminished a little bit. If I'm Tulane and I've got a prize pitcher and I just can't afford to get him hurt, like I mean, if I'm them, that dude's throwing like 10 innings the whole fall. We're shutting him down. The other thing I would say is I think they should have pitchers report early. So right now, the data report and first practice is like the middle of January. I think like literally like Jan 1, pitchers can report and start the ramp up period because so many coaches say, well, we just don't have enough time. We don't have enough ramp up period to get these guys ready to pitch. Whereas, professional baseball, they have a month and a half ramp up.
Yep.
I think it's more important than ever to get these pitchers ramped up in the most efficient and most careful way possible.
It's even in that sense. I mean, go around, think of all the wonderful, and check it out on d1baseball.com, the write-ups for the teams throughout the fall. Like, hey, Arkansas has, hey, these guys aren't throwing this fall. They're coming back from whatever this may be. 3 or 4 injuries on a pitching staff would be like minute compared to what usually happens. And in a tough year, you may be looking at 6 to 8. And you keep bringing up Tulane and even Rice, Stanford, the Dukes, private schools where, hey, if these guys get hurt, there's no like kids just walking around campus that we can just like kind of add to the roster here, or it just makes things really difficult. Let me shift over to the revenue sharing aspect of it, because one of the things that I keep hearing, and I think the grandiose idea of you're always looking to the premier programs, like the top 3. And I think even within the SEC, the NIL packages, it's not the same. It's kind of like the F1. Hey, there's a group of like 4 or 5 that can win. These guys, yes, they're here, but like they're not playing at the same level with the same money. Revenue sharing, I mean, obviously football is going to get a ton of this. What are they talking about for baseball? Like, how much of the package will these kids get? Because I think everyone thinks, oh, I'm just going to get paid. Oh, college baseball. I still don't believe it's going to be these college kids, for the most part, are not going to be making tons of money.
No, not in baseball. Yeah, I mean, what the problem is, they're going to exhaust a lot of this in football and basketball. In baseball, just get a little bit. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, here's the unfortunate truth about baseball is I think the general idea from administrators and presidents is that kids that play college baseball don't really need it as much. I mean, whether that's true, whether that's false, that's just like the general feeling. It's why baseball historically for the last 25 years has gotten absolutely screwed on any kind of scholarship relief or anything like that. Like that's just the general idea from these people. So I do not think baseball is going to get a lot in that regard. But the problem baseball has now is it's going to be really hard to bitch about that if we have 14 more scholarships. Baseball players are getting NIL money. It's like beggars can't be choosers, and like it's kind of hard to complain about it. But yeah, I don't think baseball is going to get a ton from the revenue sharing, but it's going to differ from place to place and conference to conference.
Now, can you tell? And I don't even know if this was an article, but I've been really curious about it. I haven't found much or anything on it, but like the Title IX aspect of these things. So the balancing of men's and women's sports, how will that be affected with this? And then how will the revenue? I was trying to figure out what's the revenue sharing of like softball and baseball, stuff like that. Have you seen anything on it?
I mean, I would think like softball and baseball, especially with the popularity of softball right now.
Yeah,
I think you're going to have to be very close, or there's going to be people raising a stink, and rightfully so. I mean, in some of these places, you look at softball, like I mean, their crowds, their ratings are really good. They're not quite baseball, but they're close enough to where if you had a big disparity in the revenue sharing model, they're going to be like, wait a second, like go compare our ratings like the SEC tournament to baseball. So, no, I think the Title IX component is like probably the final piece of this whole thing that I don't think a lot of people have really thought about. You make a funny comment, like a good comment there of like, I haven't read much about it. Well, they haven't really talked a lot about it. Like I cannot imagine like in the back of this whole situation going, okay, so let's balance everything that we're talking about based on Title IX, because a lot of the things they're talking about, I mean, from just a surface level view, like it's like it doesn't even make sense from a Title IX perspective, right? So yeah, I don't know how they're going to rectify that. I would not want to be the person that's in charge of rectifying that. It's all over the map right now.
It's well, to anybody listening, I've been trying to find stuff on this because Title IX's come into place for forever in my life with regards to college athletics and just seeing, like you said, the popularity of softball just
Yeah,
explode, which has been awesome to see. But even the NIL packages, we talked about that girl that went from Stanford to Texas Tech, and that kind
yeah,
of
Nigel
gear.
Kennedy,
Yeah, so
$1 million.
which is I was starting to think, I was like, maybe like this may flip a little bit from the men's side to the women's.
Yeah,
Anyway, your last point on here, and I'm going to read it off to you. The new roster and scholarship rules very much diminish power conference recruiting in the high school ranks. If head
yeah,
coaches only have 34 roster spots in the SEC, Big 12, or ACC, for instance, they are much more likely to hit the transfer portal for more proven commodities, given the premium on roster spots. Tell me a little bit more about what you meant with this, especially for our listeners, which are inherently a
absolutely.
lot of prep people.
Well, it's like anything. If you're an SEC coach, an ACC coach, Big 12 coach, the fact of the matter is expectations are higher. Like they expect you to win big and win at a big level immediately. Well, if you're a college baseball coach and you can go out and I use Georgia as a reference because I think Georgia does an awesome job in the portal. Like if you look
Mhm.
at all the pickups that Wes Johnson had this year, it's pretty much like a laundry list of guys that just kicked ass in the mid major ranks. And so what I mean by that is if you're Wes Johnson and you're trying to win in the SEC immediately, you're trying to be a top 8 seed, host throughout the playoffs, the regionals and tournament, and get to Omaha. Like, are you, even with the talent East Cobb and whatnot in Georgia, are you going to load your class year in and year out when you only have 34 roster spots with unproven young players? You may take guys that are, you may handpick two, three, four kids who are high level, draft risks and just kind of NIL them out of the draft. But other than that, I mean, if I'm trying to win immediately, I'm not putting my chips in on a high school kid who maybe has never faced more than a 4A level or 5A level competition. I'm taking the guy that was at and again, I'm not trying to down these programs, but like if I'm Georgia, I'm taking the guy from Mercer who hit 380 with 17 jacks. I'm taking the guy from I'm taking the guy from Kennesaw State who wants to go to the SEC and hits 15 jacks and hit 400 last year. Like I'm taking that. I'm not taking the dude out of Beaufort, Georgia, who raked in high school, but I have any idea how he's going to transition to Division I baseball. Like if I'm trying to win now, that's what I do. And so I just think with less roster spots, I think that the power conference schools are going to rely a little bit more on the portal. I think what will happen is I think you're going to see, you think about like Southern Miss, for instance. You think about Louisiana, for instance. Louisiana, has gotten a couple of guys year in and year out. Same with USM that Mississippi State, Ole Miss, LSU have gone after. You think of Hayden Dirk at
Mhm.
Louisiana. You think of
Kid from
uh,
Nichols that's going to LSU now.
yeah, Jacob Myers. You think of guys like DeBarge. I mean, he could have gone to LSU too. You look at Southern Miss and Slade Wilkes. So I know he's kind of had an up and down college career, but I mean, you covered him on the beat out of high school. Like Slade Wilkes was a big deal, and he
It's
went to USM.
it's fascinating you bring that up, and it were like, and I want to ask you if you heard anything about this from the mid-major side. But
Yeah,
what's the biggest thing for these big schools, these power, because there are millions of dollars on the line, right? These coaches are getting paid a lot. They're investing
yeah,
a lot into the facilities. Winning is expected. They're on TV all the time. Experience is paramount. And it's something that it's become very prevalent, right? Going off your freshman year and getting 300
hmm
at bats is more valuable than being a top 100 recruit and sitting. It's just, those are the facts. This is what we're seeing
absolutely.
out of this way. The other side of things is that experience is something that a mid-major school can sell, right? Hey, you can come here and you talk about Kyle DeBarge especially, right? Oh, this guy's going to be an awesome, huge free agent. Well, he enjoyed his time at Louisiana. He loves Louisiana Lafayette. Great place to play. Your
Yeah.
superstars,
Walker
rock stars.
Yannick's another one.
And you just never know the relationships that these coaches are going to build. So it's worth it to take those chances. And I think for recruits from our side, you want to play, you want to develop, you have to get game tape. I always think of football and even basketball to an extent. Like you got to be on the field, dude. You got to get after it. Now, I do think it's important for these big programs, and you can look historically the last few years. While the Paul Skeens is coming in, Dylan Cruz is on campus for 3 years. And there's a plethora of guys. Jacob Gonzalez, shortstop, freshman year, they build him up. Now the auxiliary pieces, the I don't want to call the lower end recruits, but like, hey, the second baseman in the 8-hole, it may behoove us to pull something kind of what Kentucky has done, getting some really good older guys who can fill a role and want to win. So have you seen anything from the mid-majors? I hate calling them mid-majors because I'll put respect on them, but them going out there and saying, hey, come check it. You have a chance to play with us right away. We'll reevaluate after the year. We'll reevaluate after 2 years. And if need be, and somebody's paying you a lot of money, we'll wish you well.
Yeah, here's the thing. So when I made that paragraph in that story, some mid-major coaches kind of reached out and said, hey, like, we're going to get like, pillaged if we get these players on campus, because what'll happen is like these hotshot high school players, they might be more apt to go to our place, but they're just going to leave after a year and go to the SEC. I said, well, so I'll take a step back and say, would you rather never have those guys?
Yeah.
Or have them and at least have a chance to keep them? I mean, like you said, we just talked about DeBarge. Walker Yannick is a perfect example. Walker literally could have made like $500,000 in the portal last year. Chose to stay with Jay Sirianni and Sam Houston. So if you can cultivate those relationships and at least give them something, which programs like Southern Miss, programs like Texas State, Louisiana, programs La Tech, those kind of programs have a little bit of money to try to keep those kids. I think if they can go there, ball out, and you can give them something, I think there's actually a pretty good shot that they stay put. I really do. And I'm just one of those people. I'd rather have a chance to get those kids than not have a chance at all.
Exactly. And actually, when this came down the pike, I thought it would work both ways, right? Because I just said it, playing time is paramount. And I think for a lot of freshmen, they realize like, hey, it was cool going to this school, but I want to be on the field. Like just wearing the team gear around campus doesn't do it for me. So a lot of times you'll see those guys go down, not that they're downgrading, but they're going, hey, this is a better fit for me. And I just want to play some ball.
Yeah, I'll be very curious. The only thing that concerns me a little bit is if you're setting your roster essentially for the season on September 1. What happens to the kid that doesn't make the cut a week before fall workouts start? Like he can't go anywhere because like all these other schools have full rosters too.
Yeah, that's why
that's the thing that's the gray area for me. Like, do these schools? I mean, are we going to see situations where Coastal Carolina is back channeling with a kid at South Carolina going, hey, are you going to make the team? If not, I'm going to cut somebody before September 1. You can come over here.
And you want to know,
or something like that.
Midweek games are going to become almost non-existent. You're going to have to really cut down those double midweek games. You can't afford to do that with a 34-man roster.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder, Wayne Graham, a long time ago when he coached, he was actually a proponent of a 52-game season. And I actually kind of wonder a little bit if they end up moving the number of games down a little bit to compensate for this.
That'll only really drive up the meaning in each one of those games, which I already love watching from that standpoint.
The more the merrier, man. I like more carnage.
It's just ultra fascinating from the recruiting, and the stress is put on the coaches and the parents to kind of decide these things. And the big thing for me when we're trying to help recruits out here and what they're going through, do you think any mid-majors, and we've seen all the big dogs, right? In the past, what is it? Quantity has a quality unto its own, right? Yeah. And to go out there, grab recruits as many as possible. Now that's slowed down. What we've seen, that's slowed down a bit. The NCAA pushed back kind of the coaches getting in touch too early in the early recruitment, but they're still committing guys, and it's happening. Do you anticipate any mid-major schools kind of waiting to see who and I don't like using this word either, but get guys who get axed, right? There's still really good
Yeah.
players who committed to, premium power. Hey, we know, we kind of anticipate that they have 6 pitchers on this roster. They're going to have to cut this one. We're going to get this guy. Is anybody waiting for that yet?
Yeah, I mean, if they aren't, I mean, let's be honest, I would be doing that. I mean, here's the thing, and I kind of go back to the parents on this of recruits. Again, I won't name the school, but I've had parents that have committed and signed with a certain school that have shown up and their kids gotten cut, in the middle of the fall or at the end of the fall. And they're like, man, I would have never seen this coming. I would tell parents, like, actually go dig into somebody's roster. Do not take it. And again, most coaches are going to be great about this, but like, don't just take somebody's word for it, because they're always going to say, and you're always going to think that your kid's not going to be the one getting cut. But I mean, it does not take a rocket scientist to go look at a school's roster and go, yeah, like if you're a pitcher right now, you looked at like Arkansas's pitching on paper, you're not going to go, oh yeah, like I think little Kendall's going to pitch from day one. Like, no shot in hell. Like, they're ultra talented on the mound. So I think it's more important than ever for parents to be very educated. You guys do an awesome job in this pod of educating parents and players and whatnot. But I mean, I think it's more important than ever to be educated on the actual rosters of these teams. I think it would alleviate some of the stress involved with the decision-making process. And the other thing too, we haven't even talked about this, is, the 25% is gone. The 25% scholarship minimum is gone. So, again, we talked about equivalency and the ability to stretch 25 over 34. The programs I really think about with that is like LSU, because there are so many kids, this as well as anybody, man, there are probably hundreds and thousands of kids in the state of Louisiana who, like, hell, they'll take 2% to play baseball at LSU. So I think schools like that are really going to benefit from the 25% being gone. And frankly, I've always been a proponent of eliminating that, because again, if a kid is willing to go to your place for 5, why in the world do you need to pay him 25?
Exactly. I mean, shoot, a lot of kids in Louisiana would rather play for LSU than the Yankees. Which,
yeah, they'd rather they're like, I'll pay you guys just to put the uniform on.
Exactly. Well, Kendall, like you said, the recruiting essential aspect of it, we pride ourselves on continuing to bring the most up-to-date, incredible information in the realm of amateur baseball. So hopefully everybody will continue to stop back here. If you have any questions, please send them in. But we will be updating this situation because it sounds very much fluid, Kendall. And hopefully we'll have you on soon if you'll come back.
Dude, anytime. And, we could even do a turbo pod next week, because it sounds like the SEC is very close to announcing what they will be as a cap, when they're expecting the roster cap to actually be set. It could be in the next 4 or 5 days. So, well, we're just getting started.
We will stay tuned. We might have to have you on a breaking news pod.
We'll just add on to it.
Until next time, this has been the War Room powered by Prep Baseball, and we'll see you guys at the ballpark.